Good morning, everybody, and welcome again. I'm Catherine, editor of the Herald, and I'll be chairing our Scottish election hustings today, again hosted by Women in Public Affairs in association with DeHavilland Scotland. Huge thank you to both of them for making this event possible and for you all for coming. So we have representatives from 6 political parties with us today, and I will introduce them shortly. You can just sit still for a minute. You can guess who they are. Each of them will have equal time to speak. My role is to keep us to time and make sure that everybody is heard and to try to have a focused, respectful discussion. So I may at times have to interrupt to do that, to keep us to time. So just a couple of quick things. We're due to run until 11:30. If we could have phones on silent, please post on social media, of course, please just do it quietly. And there will be an opportunity at the end for audience questions, which is really important. So 90 minutes together. Shortly, we're going to hear from Rebecca Watson. She is co-chair of Women in Public Affairs Scotland. And then we're going to have a short 2-minute opening statement from each of our politicians. And after that, we're going to move on to themed questions on education, business, and childcare. And then we're going to finish, as I say, with our open Q&A where you can raise other issues. And then hopefully, depending on time, some short closing statements from our politicians before we wrap up. So we want a lively discussion, but we would quite like it to be respectful. So please don't shout out or be abusive, and keep your audience questions really to the point so we can maximise our time. So why are we here? The idea was born out of some frustration within the electorate that this was so far a male-dominated campaign. All of our prospective First Ministers are men. So the event was created in response to that. So today we have 6 politicians who are women. And what do they have to say? But, and it is a really, really, really strong but, it is not a women's event in inverted commas. It is a hustings covering many serious issues and not only those with specific significance or consequences for women. So want to be really clear on that. And now we'll hear from Rebecca Watson, co-chair of Public Affairs, Women in Public Affairs Scotland.
Thanks, Catherine. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Rebecca Watson, and I am co-chair of Women in Public Affairs Scotland, and also a Public Affairs Manager at Weber Shandwick. Now, to anyone who's new to WiPA, we are a voluntary network bringing together women across public affairs, politics, communications, and policy. We formed in 2019 with a simple aim to support, connect, and empower women across the industry. And since then, WiPA Scotland has grown to more than 500 members and is part of a Europe-wide network alongside WiPA London, WiPA Cymru, WiPA North of England, and WiPA Brussels. We run free events. We have begun our own mentoring programme sponsored by the Royal Bank of Scotland and create spaces where women can build confidence, skills, and networks in what remains, in many respects, a male-dominated profession. As we look ahead to the Scottish Parliament election, it felt particularly important to host an event like this. Women make up over half of Scotland's population, and while progress has been made, women accounted for around 45% of MSPs at the last election. However, there is a real possibility that this figure could go backwards. And this matters because all policy decisions, including the economy, taxation, public services, and infrastructure, affect women's lives every day. Ensuring women's perspectives are heard isn't about special treatment, it's about better, more representative policy making. There's been a lot of discussions during this election campaign about how male-dominated many hustings have been, and we wanted to do something practical in response. Not to exclude anyone, but to ensure that women's voices are properly heard on a full range of issues that matter to all of us. With most party leaders currently being men, and Gillian is co-leader of the Greens, that imbalance is not something that will change in the short term. I mean, unless next week doesn't go as well as some people had hoped. It also underlines a wider challenge, encouraging women into politics, supporting them to stay, and helping them progress into leadership positions. This morning is about creating space for women's voices, experience and expertise, and we're delighted to bring together such a strong panel to do exactly that. Now, this event wouldn't be possible without a number of people, so if you could bear with me for just 2 minutes. I'd like to start by thanking the Herald for partnering with us at this event. Nina, Callum and Andrew, thank you so much for your support, and Catherine, thank you very much for chairing this morning's discussion. Thank you as well to our annual sponsors DeHavilland, who have kindly sponsored this event. Without your support, this event and many other WiPA events throughout the year simply wouldn't be possible. And thank you to my colleagues in the WiPA Scotland Committee, all in the front row. It's already been a very busy year, and your commitment and support are absolutely invaluable. And finally, a huge thank you to our panellists. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, especially with just 1 week to go before the election. We know that you'll be extremely busy, and your time and contributions are very much appreciated. And as I draw to a close, I'd like to ask that when you head back to work, you think about women who might value the support of WiPA and the opportunities we have to offer, and encourage them to get involved. And if you're a woman in public affairs, policy or communications here today, and this is your first WiPA event, please do come along to more. Our network is always open for you. And if you'd be interested in becoming a mentor for our next mentoring programme, want to find out more about how you can become a mentee, or would like to sponsor a future WiPA event, please do get in touch with us. I'm really looking forward to the discussion, and thank you all for being a part of it.
Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so our panellists, very pleased to be joined this morning by 6 politicians representing the parties contesting this election. From this end to this end, from the Scottish National Party, we have Shirley-Anne Somerville. Feel free to give a clap. We have Wendy Chamberlain from the Scottish Liberal Democrats. We have Gillian Mackay from the Scottish Green Party. Jackie Baillie from Scottish Labour. Sue Webber from Scottish Conservatives, and Kim Schmulian from Reform UK. Thank you all very much for being with us today. So we're going to begin, as I said, with opening statements. You've got 2 minutes each. I know I keep going on about this, but we could be here till tea time, and I don't want that for a number of reasons, because people have come here on a time limit. So you have 2 minutes to answer an opening question, which I'm going to tell you. Set out your party's priorities for Scotland over the next Parliament, and what difference it would make if voters send women like you to Holyrood. Now, I know it's not women like you who are an MP, but women like you, of your calibre. So, should we start from this end, or any preference to start from this end? Shirley-Anne. Party's priorities for Scotland for the next Parliament, and what difference it makes to voters if women like you go to Holyrood.
So the SNP's priorities for this election, as always, are the people's priorities, and that's why we are determined to keep the eradication of child poverty very high on the agenda, but also doing so in a way that grows a thriving economy. We've got the commitments there to help people with the cost of living. That is the thing that comes up most on the doors during this election. And we know that Westminster is rather consumed with its own chaos at the moment. This election has to focus on what matters to people. So that's why we're looking at the expansion of childcare. That's why we're looking at reducing costs through that £2 bus cap. It's important that we do things that make a real difference to people and the struggles that they are having. And what difference does it make to have, I think, any woman in politics, is to make sure our life experiences are shared and we're there at the top table. There are too many rooms which I still walk into where I am in the minority as a woman. And if you're in the minority at the woman, you should make sure you're at the top of the table and the one that's making the decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Shirley-Anne. Wendy, over to you.
Lovely to be here this morning. As an MP, I'm also the Deputy Leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, so we have got a gender-balanced top team. But I think it's also important that I'm here as an MP because there is absolutely no doubt that this election is about the interplay in many ways between what happens at Holyrood and what happens at Westminster. And many of the topics that are coming up around household energy bills, cost of living generally, yes, there is an interplay between Holyrood and Westminster in relation to that. And when we're looking at what we've had for the last 19 years under the SNP, there is an argument around the fact that there is a need for change and a need to see better collaboration between both governments. everybody feels a bit scunnered, I think. This has been a low energy election in many ways. Those household bills are soaring. There are long waits to see GPs. Everybody talks about that. And we have had problems with transport. Everybody knows that the ferries have been in a very bad situation at the moment. So Scottish Liberal Democrats, what do we say? We want to deliver. And we've got examples of delivering. We supported the Scottish Government budget earlier this year, and we were pragmatic in the things that we delivered. Business rates, a huge issue for businesses, and we were able to deliver additional support through our agreement in the budget. So that's what you get with Scottish Liberal Democrats, individuals who work hard for their communities and are willing to be pragmatic to deliver what is needed for Scotland's people. And in terms of, as a woman, I think it's just really important from a visibility perspective. I certainly never saw myself doing this job. It was a man that asked me to think about doing it. So this is great to see so many men here in the room today as well, because it's not just about women, it's about the benefits to everybody.
Thank you. Gillian, over to you.
Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for being here this morning on what is a really lovely morning when you could have been outside. And as our health spokesperson, I probably would encourage you to do that. I think it's absolutely a cost of living election, and it's so important that whatever we do in the next term of Parliament, it's about putting more money back in people's pockets. That's why we want to deliver free bus travel for everyone. In the last session of Parliament, we delivered free under 22s bus, and that's proven hugely popular with those young people, but also others in their family too, making sure that they can get around their local area, that they can get to clubs, to jobs, to after-school activities that they otherwise might not have been able to. We want to deliver free bus travel for everyone and make sure that that is the first option for people to get around their communities, get to work, get to leisure activities, move people out of their cars and into a mode of transport that will benefit not just their pocket and the household budgets, but the local environment, air quality and connectivity across Scotland. But we need to bring those buses back into public ownership as well and make sure that they go places when people need them to go there, making sure that nurses can get home from their shifts on public transport rather than buses stopping at 5 o'clock and nobody being able to get across communities, particularly important in rural areas, but there are many of our urban areas where those bus routes just don't deliver for people at the moment. We've put forward plans to bring forward the biggest expansion of free childcare in a generation, making sure that families are supported and particularly that women can get back into the workplace. There are issues in health that we need to deal with as well, particularly the lack of investment in research, in particular in many areas of women's healthcare, making sure we raise that standard across the board and crucially that women are believed when they come forward with symptoms and actually get the treatment that they need in a timely manner. And in terms of what it does to elect women like me into Parliament, I was really pleased to bring forward safe access zones last session in conjunction with many of the women in this room who put their time and their effort into responding to the consultation and supporting the bill. There's more we need to do on that. We need to decriminalise abortion and take it out of the criminal justice system and really make sure it's a system that works for women. And I would really like to be a part of that next session.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, your turn.
Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jackie Baillie. I'm Deputy Leader of the Scottish Labour Party. I appeared briefly as a youth on debate night last night. I am so owning that one. I am so owning that one. It was tremendous. But I have to say that this election is about change. Right? Scotland has had the SNP for 20 years. In those 20 years, waiting lists are too high. There are 10,000 children in temporary accommodation, homeless, without a permanent roof over their heads. Rough sleeping has gone up in all of our major cities. I look at, the NHS, waiting lists are too long. Securing a GP appointment is like running a marathon. It is nigh on impossible. So we have real issues. The lack of growth in the country is holding us back. And we don't have enough apprenticeships. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change that. There is a real chance to change the government at this election. What Scottish Labour would do is we would make sure that you have an NHS that is there when you need it, because that's what matters. We would make sure that we make life affordable for you, that we create jobs, and that we listen to the business community who have told us that there are 9,000 apprenticeships, gaps in what you need in terms of skills for the future and for the economy. We will plug that gap. We know we need to build affordable housing, both for rent and for sale. So we have committed to building 125,000 new homes for Scotland over the period of the next Parliament. And I want to see safer communities, more police on my streets. I want to see our town centres regenerated. But I want a government that's on my side, that's open, that's transparent, that's not mired in secrecy, that's not mired in scandal. So the bottom line for me is somebody like me represents my community because I live in it. I experience exactly the same things that my neighbours experience, and I am a strong female voice in Parliament. Some say too strong occasionally, but part of my job in the Labour Party was to bring forward more women candidates. The important thing for women who manage to get there is not to pull up the ladder after them, is to make sure the ladder is there for others to climb too. So I'm very proud that we have selected an equal number of men to women in winnable seats. That's the key thing. And I hope our Parliament, at least in my party, will reflect the diversity of the population of Scotland and bring their life experience to the table. Thank you.
You're down with the kids as well, Jackie.
I'm down with the kids.
That's good. Sue, are you down with the kids?
Well, I don't self-identify as a 20-year-old anymore. It does seem a long, long time ago that my body is aching with all the steps I'm doing.
Set out your priorities.
So I suppose as a Scottish Conservative, my name is Sue Webber, and I'm standing in a seat in Edinburgh South Western, so not so much the West. But I was the Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Transport, so I'm hoping as the discussion today talks about some of the issues that perhaps Gillian's raised around bus travel, we can, and the importance of how roads connect communities and how important that is for all of us getting to work and getting our young people to school and early learning facilities. But our economy is stagnating, and that's a fact. And businesses are closing, and I frankly saw that a really harsh reality today when I got off the train at Queen Street and walked up Bath Street. I could not believe the to let signs and the number of vacant properties, specifically in Glasgow city centre. That is actually breaking my heart. Last time I was here, which goes a bit to what did you do, why would you want me here, is I worked in healthcare for 30 years before I came here. And one of the last times I was on Bath Street, I was actually visiting the Atlantic Clinic down the road. And that seems to be the only business that seems to have bloomed and got bigger, because that just shows you that private healthcare has part of a solution in our healthcare issues. But, you know, the SNP spend their time, and even more so in the last few days, saying that their number one priority is independence. And I think that's, it's actually really quite disappointing, because as this campaign started, it was the cost of living I was hearing about on the doors. It was improving jobs, getting apprenticeships, getting into hospitals and healthcare. Now all people are saying to me is they want to stop the SNP. And that is the harsh reality when people are struggling across so many things. And I think that is rather a challenge that we do not want to have to face again. Let's just get on with fixing the things that matter to everybody across Scotland. So the Conservatives are really going to focus on standing up for business, reform planning and procurement, and investing in the skills to get Scotland going, because there's so many women that are the ones that take up those small businesses to start with. And I hear time and time again about how difficult that is for them. And I want to make sure that today, hopefully I can present some of the things that we're going to do to help you do that. Let's also remember that nothing is free when it's all taxpayer funded. And it's taxpayers that run mostly in the private sector that are funding all the free gimmicks that are given out as bribes, perhaps you might see. I want to also say a little bit briefly about why me as a woman, I suppose the Conservatives also have a deputy leader that's a female. Our Megan Gallagher, who was with you last night, was also our previous deputy leader. So we have a history of the supporting women. But also women of a certain age, perhaps this is I was only 5 years as an MSP, so I had a career before I came in to Parliament. And I think that's what's most important, because you're bringing a different perspective. You know, you've not come out of college, studied politics, gone to work for an MSP or an MP, been a researcher, then get a job or become a candidate and elected. You've got no real life experience. You've not faced redundancy. You've not faced the challenges of getting a job, keeping a job, and getting that promotion. Fighting against men that seem to be able to walk into interviews and slide their way through, which is what I experienced firsthand. And I think that's a challenge. So why me? I bring that perspective in, and I'll carry on fighting for women.
Thanks,
Thank
Sue.
you.
Thank you. Kim, last but not least.
So my name is Kim Schmulian, and I'm the candidate for Cathcart Pollock at the upcoming election. I'd like to say at the outset that I'm not a politician. My background is in the law, and I currently work for the Scottish Episcopal Church. Picking up firstly on something that Sue said, I moved to Glasgow in 1990 from Edinburgh. Glasgow at that time was buzzing. We just had the Garden Festival and European City of Culture. Hipsway in Texas were riding high in the charts. People like Ron McCulloch and Colin Barr ran Clubland. You know, every weekend Glasgow was full. You know, taxis galore, night buses. It was just the place to be. Princess Square had just opened as well. Lots of new designers coming to Glasgow. Viral Sassoon opening. But something has happened and it's all changed. And I can really pinpoint that to 1999 when we just started to become a bigger and bigger state. And I don't think that has been good for Glasgow, and I don't think it's been good for Scotland. So I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at Reform's manifesto. It's all about change, and it's about making the state smaller again and giving people more power, putting money back into workers' pockets by, you know, the immediate thing that we would do would be to cut 1p off the tax rate, and also changing the crazy system of the 6 bands that we have at the moment and putting it back to 3, because we don't think the current system encourages people to do overtime and work, particularly within our health industry. And I'd like to say something about public services, because I really feel that the SNP have failed Scottish people in public services. We're putting an awful lot of money into public services, and they should be better. By international comparators, we're putting the same percentage of GDP into public services as other countries, but the outcomes simply aren't good enough. You know, other countries are leading the way with the same amount of money, and we can't just sit and say, oh, it's because in these countries the weather's better, so people work harder. You know, these are the things that we really need to be looking at. I'm fed up with hearing that, oh, we just need to spend more money, because I genuinely think that that's not the answer. And I don't think it's delivering for the people of Scotland. So Reform's message on the 7th of May is, if you want change, vote for Reform.
And the difference in sending somebody like you to Holyrood?
So as well as being a lawyer, I've trained in conflict management in my career. And that has been hugely beneficial, both in law and business, where a lot of the time you have to focus on priorities, not just yours, but your opponents, and reach consensus. Now, a couple of days ago, I got the induction programme for the newbies that are going to be going into Holyrood. And it was all about how to conduct yourself in the chamber, what happens in committees, do's and don'ts of things. But I actually think what would have been really beneficial to be in there would have been, you know, conflict management training and some negotiation. Because what I often hear on the doors is that people are disengaged with Holyrood because they just see people arguing all the time, but nothing ever seems to get better for the people. So I think we need a new approach. And I certainly would be pushing for conflict management training and for more opportunity for MSPs just to come together, discuss things in an informal setting and try and get some common ground. I think that's what everyone wants to see.
Thank you. Okay, hold your thoughts on all of that. We can raise some of the responses at the end. So we're going to move on to our first theme of the morning, which is education. Again, we're going to ask you a question, we're going to do it, and I might spice it up and just hit you with who's going to go first and last. So, Scotland's education system is widely agreed to be under strain. Question to you six. What is the single indicator you will be judged on at the next election, and why should voters trust that your plan will improve it? Any volunteers to go first? Or am I just going to point at Jackie?
Oh, well done.
I'm going to point
Give me
at
time
Jackie.
to open up my
Jackie, I'll
education
repeat
stuff.
it. Scotland's education system widely agreed to be under strain. What's a single indicator that Scottish Labour would be judged on at the next election if you were in power? And why should voters trust that your plan would improve it?
So I'm going to start by rejecting the premise of the question. I don't think there is one single indicator. I think it's a basket of indicators. Because when you consider the complexity of our education system, we need improvements at school level, at colleges, at university, and we need to see how people emerge into the world of work. If you were to force me to pick one, I would say that we shouldn't have 1 in 6 young people currently not in education, training, or employment. So that's the thing I would judge us on. I can't help but reflect that John Swinney and Nicola Sturgeon at the time said, judge us on education, we'll close the attainment gap. They failed to do so. It was John Swinney, again, I recall, that downgraded the exam results of our young people based on their postcode. And I thought that was a disgrace, to be frank with you. But the challenge starts in schools, where our children are not attaining to the same degree that they used to. There are young people today leaving school without the ability to read or write. 40% of them don't get a single hire. So our system is currently failing them. We would put in 2,000 additional teachers to help children recover. They would be specifically targeted at those experiencing those challenges, with an additional 1,500 classroom assistants, 300 of them for those with additional special needs. Key to what we're proposing, though, is, having listened to the business community, we know there's a skills shortage in Scotland. We are simply not training enough young people as apprentices. So we would put in an additional 9,000 apprenticeships in the growth sectors in the economy to try and kickstart the economy. I don't know how many of you have been into BAE Systems recently. If you do go, it's like you're in the United Nations. There is every accent, from across the world in there amongst the welders, because we do not have enough trained homegrown welders. So we need to get procurement, I'm drifting off into something else, but we need to get procurement right so that we are actually building in Scotland using the skills of the people in Scotland. And of course, universities are suffering because of the current funding model. We have been discussing with universities how we fix that funding model so that we are not in the position that Dundee, Abertay, Edinburgh having to shed jobs, and that is incredibly worrying for the academic community. But for me, our commitment is to maintain free tuition, but get to a more stable funding model for both universities and colleges, because there is no right way, no right path for every single child. We need to provide them with that scale of opportunity, whether it's going in directly into the world of work, going to college, or going to university. They are our future, and we are currently not doing, I think, as well as we can do for them and for businesses as well.
Okay, thank you. Shirley-Anne, would you like to respond? Some criticisms there of the current government?
Sure. So I think it's very important we look at levels of literacy and numeracy, and we can do that in different stages within schooling. We are seeing record levels of literacy and numeracy amongst many of those levels, and we're also seeing a near historic level of positive destinations after school. But there is always the challenge to do more in education, and rightly so, which is why we do need to continue to look at attainment. We need to look at attendance, particularly after COVID. There has been a challenge with attendance levels, and that's not in a way in coming down on parents or being hard on children. It's understanding why some young people aren't attending school and ensuring that the support is there to allow them to do so. Part of that is to ensure that we're actually supporting people with additional special needs, and young people with additional special needs. It's an exceptionally important part of our system, whether that's in early years, schools, colleges, universities. So there's an importance on continuing with the recommendations that were in the McManus Review that was published not long before Parliament rose, and also looking at how we can assist people, and the young person and their families, as there's a journey to a diagnosis, perhaps, within, whether it's neurodivergence, ADHD, or whatnot. We also need to look at other things that we can help within a school setting in particular, and that's why, although head teachers have the ability to ban mobile phones in classroom, we do want to see that ban becoming something that is enforced right across Scotland. That takes us on to something wider that we might get into about online harms and the challenges of very young to adults and what happens with the challenge we have around the online community, the positives, but the many negatives that are part of that.
What would be your single indicator you think the SNP should be judged on?
Well, I mentioned literacy and numeracy right at the start, and I
Yep.
think that's one of the important things. When we look at colleges, one of the important programmes that we brought through within our child poverty programme was the RISE programme that we brought up with colleges, because it's not just about getting into colleges, it's about supporting people, but particularly women, in employment, employability, in childcare, in transport. So how can a person get into university but also be supported to stay there until the end of the course and ensure they go into employment afterwards? So it's not just about a place on a course, it's about the wraparound support, and we're delighted to work with colleges for that. And lastly, obviously, on universities, it was the SNP that ensured there is free tuition in university. I'm sure many of the folks in this room have benefited from that. I would like my children, if they wish to go to university, to be able to benefit from that policy too.
Okay, thank you. Gillian?
So going through the entire stages of school, we want to start with a play-based kindergarten stage, starting formal schooling at 7 rather than some of the very little ones that could be as young as 4.5 that are starting formal schooling. There's some really good evidence from places like Finland that actually that helps develop various skills in young children and set them up for that positive engagement with lifelong learning. We also want to ban homework for some of those younger pupils because they go to school for several hours a day, do their work, come home, and then have to do more work on top of that. Being able to give them that time to rest and recharge, like we all like after work, is really important, again, for that engagement for them for lifelong learning. Increasing the number of teachers and lowering the class sizes across the stages of school is hugely important to make sure that children get that one-to-one time with their teachers and that support. Increasing the number of additional support needs assistance as well, and making sure that there's progression for those people. They're very often some of the most dedicated people in those classrooms, dealing with some of the most complex needs for a variety of children and young people. And at the moment, I don't think they're getting that level of progression or reward for the job that they're putting in. We want to scrap exams. Very often that is assessing what young people can remember on one single day and not actually what they learn over a course or over several years of learning. And actually doing that continuous assessment shows what they've learned, shows their skills that have developed over years, rather than that one high stress environment that can make or break children's entire lives. I failed my higher English the first time round, passed it the second time round, didn't have a very good day the first time round, but that could have had a huge impact to young people who are going on to a variety of courses who need those grades the first time round.
So what would be the single indicator the Greens would be judged on?
So I think positive destinations is a really important one, but we have to do more, as many other people have said, about further and higher education as well. We've seen crises in multiple universities. Some of that is around funding, some of that's around governance as well, and we really need to look into that governance piece too.
Okay, thank you very much. Kim, we'll come to you. Again, single indicator that you as a reform party would be judged on at the next election, and why voters should trust you to improve it.
Well, the single indicator I think we should be judged on at the next election is getting kids into suitable jobs and training and sustaining them within that, because dropout rates are actually very high. I'm actually appalled by the statistics on maths and science particularly that we have at the moment, because these are the skills that we need for the jobs of the future, the tech-based industries, the kind of work that we want to see coming into Scotland, the kind of investment that we want to see coming into Scotland. I mean, I went to a small comprehensive school in East Lothian, and I was very fortunate that I was the last year that benefited from streaming in schools. So many of you probably don't know what that is, but basically in first year they tested you on a range of subjects, and you were then put into classes in the following year according to your intellectual aptitude. And it was nothing to do with social background. It was all about getting similar kids into a similar environment where you could really thrive and learn. And the following year, they did away with that. And from what I was told by teachers at the time, that it wasn't good. It wasn't good for attainment. It wasn't good for the children. Wasn't good for the teachers. It wasn't good for the statistics. So I think that that would be something that I personally would like to look at again. It's not a reform policy at the moment, but I would say that education is in such a bad way at the moment that no options are off the table and everything should be looked at.
Okay, so why should voters trust reform to improve Scottish education?
Well, we can't just sit back and do what we've been doing because it's clearly not working. Reform's manifesto is all about change. So we should be looking to change things and see if it works. And often in this country, I see things that aren't working, but we just put up with it and we sit on it. But actually, we should think about changing things and changing things faster than we do at the moment. And I think that's the message. Reform's all about change.
Good, thank you. We're keeping to time well. Sue, don't let us down.
I'll try my
single
best.
Indicator.
I suppose I'm going to talk about what I would like to, maybe more so than the party, if that's right, because it's what I hear on the door a lot.
I did that too.
It's about the number of teachers that we have that are currently in temporary posts, and there are so many women that are teachers, and they cannot have the security of a job. They cannot get a mortgage. There's so much they cannot do when they have got that uncertainty hanging over them, and there's no reason for it whatsoever. And I think I would like to see the reduction in the number of temporary teachers and the people in those posts, and it transferred to permanent positions for them so they can have that certainty over their future career. That's one thing. But the three things the Conservatives want to do in terms of education is we want it to go back to being a knowledge-based learning and the acquisition of knowledge. We want to back teachers and restore discipline, and we want to empower our head teachers in our schools. And I was really quite... took a deep breath there when Shirley-Anne Somerville mentioned that the SNP are now wanting to ban mobile phones in classrooms, because this is something 3 years ago when I was a convener on the Education, Children and Young People Committee, I called for that. And I've had 3 years of excuses as to why the government couldn't do that. So now I think that is absolutely incredulous that they're sitting here saying that today, because classroom discipline is getting out of control, and having your young people in those classrooms that are engaged in that learning environment, the removal of mobile phones play a part in that. And I know there's some pilots going on in Edinburgh with the bags that you put your phone in and they're locked away, and I think that's having a great success. The City of Edinburgh Council is now looking to roll that out amongst all their schools, so I would like that.
Why should voters trust the Conservatives to improve everything from mobile phone bans to better jobs for teachers and security?
Well, I'm maybe to a politician's answer and not answer that directly, if that's all right, because the other thing is, that one of the great measures apparently is that positive destinations. I will then, but we tend to do what we say we're going to do.
Okay.
But positive destination is something that's thrown about all the time, but nobody really knows what it is. And who is that positive destination for? I don't think it's for the young person. I think it's for the school and the data and the stats. And I think we need to really think much more long and hard about finding what's best for our young people when they look to leave school, whether it's going to work, to college or university. There's a huge, huge push to get everyone through to universities, but I think the colleges are the unsung heroes in our higher education and further education.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to business and the economy now.
Catherine.
Oh, sorry, Wendy. That's my fault. I thought
And
I
have
had
you
you.
been?
Wendy. No, Wendy, education. Sorry, Wendy.
You first. That's absolutely fine.
Single indicator.
Yeah.
So you've got your 2 minutes.
So positive destinations absolutely needs to be the single indicator, but it needs to be balanced in terms of what that means. If we've got over-indexed people going into the wrong areas, then that's a challenge for the economy. I was on the Scottish Affairs Committee in the last Parliament, and I remember we had a round table with Scottish youth parliamentarians, a group of young people. They were bright, they were articulate, they were motivated. The question I asked them was, as a group, how does the Scottish Youth Parliament engage with business? Because business tell us that they don't have the right skills coming through from education. They did not engage with business. And I felt sorry for them because it was clearly something that they hadn't been guided to or thought of. And that clearly is a challenge. We're hearing that from business. Young people don't have the right skills. I spent a year lecturing at what was then Lauder College, which now Fife College. I think that's giving away how old I am.
Experience.
Yes, experience, definitely. But the experience there was young people who'd been failed by initial education and needed that kind of arm round them to put them onto the right path. But from a school's perspective, Shirley-Anne is right. There is absolutely no doubt that there is a tale from COVID of young children particularly coming into school with ranges of behavioural issues, speech and language therapy issues, etc. So from a Scottish Liberal Democrat perspective, we want to see more pupil support assistance with a particular focus on that speech and language, because if we do not get those things right, those young people won't progress. From a college perspective, our budget negotiations delivered 10% more funding to colleges, and I think Jackie is right. It's about that blend and mix and apprenticeships, and actually that message that university isn't for everybody it sounds like a quite negative thing. Actually, it shouldn't be. Where is the right place to go? And I look at it from my own children's perspective. I've got a 21-year-old daughter who's now in financial services. She probably would have gone to university if COVID hadn't happened, but I think she's in a much better place now. I've got a son who's going to be an unemployed actor at some point. He's down in Birmingham, and yes, we're paying fees for that. But the other thing,
why should the voters trust the Lib Dems?
The one thing I wanted to finish on was we want to bring forward a youth work bill. We want to specifically look at the reasons why young people aren't in employment and do that. But the final thing I do want to say is I do agree with Sue. We want to change the situation in terms of teachers. Teachers are feeling demotivated, and if we do not have teachers in the right places delivering the right support, then the rest of it is stuffed.
Okay, thank you, and sorry for missing you out.
That's all right, I won't take it personal.
You might go first next time.
No,
That's definitely what's going to happen.
So business and economy, which matters a lot to a lot of people in this room, aware of that. High streets, jobs, entrepreneurship, looking at the challenges facing small firms and some of the barriers that people face in starting and growing businesses in Scotland. So again, a question to you all. Kim, I'm going to start with you. What will you do, what would Reform UK do to make it easier to start and grow a business in Scotland?
So, I'm maybe going to start by focusing on hospitality, because I was at a hospitality hustings the other night, and rates dominated the conversation that evening. I also did a little exercise that afternoon before I attended the hustings, because I've actually got a lot of experience in hospitality, and I listed 15 different bits of legislation and regulation that you would have to deal with before you would even be able to open the door to any customers. So I don't think that there's any doubt from Reform's perspective that hospitality and business in general is over-regulated. But I mentioned that the theme that dominated that conversation was rates. Businesses seem to be penalised for wanting to grow and advance, make their product better. They're penalised in the rate system, and that should never be the case. People that want to grow a business, to create more wealth for the economy, to employ more people, are disincentivised. So we know that at the moment there's a rates review going on, and we heard at the beginning of the week at this event that we're not going to have any resolution to that anytime soon. And the message from the business community there was that, by the time that happens, there'll be so many businesses that have gone bust. So that is a classic example of where the Scottish Government has not been working for business, and we need to change that. And Reform has a plan to change that. Reform has a plan to completely overhaul the rate system. So that would be my message in terms of business.
Shirley-Anne, would you like to respond to that?
So I think there's a number of points where we can come in to support small businesses and people beginning a business. Obviously, the Scottish Government has been very supportive and will continue to support our small business bonus scheme that helps some of our smallest businesses in their communities. And I know that helps businesses right across the country, whether it's from small villages to our cities. We've also got to look at people who are looking to start up businesses in different areas that might not be front-facing. So the challenge that we have around emerging and new technologies and new industries is so exceptionally important. We've already seen the success of the Tech Scaler initiative within the Scottish Government, and that's certainly something we can build on, looking at different sectors that are coming up, whether it's within AI, whether it's within gaming, whether it's within advanced healthcare. There are different ways where we can look to actually encourage entrepreneurs, women and men, to begin their business. And we also need to encourage people to look abroad and to look at our export market. We've seen our export market growing. We need to do more of that. We need to ensure that people actually feel that that's something that a business in Scotland could do, and that we're setting their sights high. Now, again, there's different variations of what your business could be and whether you would want to be or could be in the export market, or you're serving your local community, which is why it's important we look from the small business bonus up to our tech scalers and up to the work that we can do with exporters and Scotland House. I do appreciate that rates and the revaluation is a challenge, which is why the Scottish Government has brought in rates relief and transitional relief for many, particularly in the leisure, hospitality industries and retail. And that's something which we will undertake also a review on. And it's also important we look at the balance that we have within rates. So we have something, and they're a very large employer in my constituency in Dunfermline, but we have Amazon and those that are working online. And we need to ensure that the rate system balances the employers like Amazon, the businesses like Amazon, with smaller organisations, smallest businesses who perhaps have more frontline costs because they actually have a place where their customers will come in. And have we got that balance right between those that are online and therefore don't have the same costs as those that are running a business where they have the challenges perhaps of rate?
Okay, thank you. Gillian?
So coming back to that theme of Amazon and some of these retailers with the big out-of-town distribution centres, they've certainly impacted high streets and the ability for some of these small businesses to not only start but flourish after that. We'd want to tax some of those bigger businesses to make sure that we could put that money back into our high streets and back into the businesses that aren't just selling things to people, but are also often part of the community and provide social spaces and support for those community groups that are round about them. We need to make sure that our schemes that are supposed to support small businesses genuinely do that, rather than some of the schemes that we have at the moment that might end up with supporting some of those bigger businesses that might not need it as much as some of the small players. We need to make sure that any support is sustainable going forward as well. We want to put, as an example, 600 million into renewables from the research stage, and particularly into some of those smaller Scottish startups that employ people in the local area, give back to those local economies, but that can have that space in that transition that we need to do, and can flourish and turn themselves into those bigger businesses, and particularly support their local communities in that sort of space. But we need to make sure that there is that support over the long term for business, rather than giving support for startups and to get them off the floor, and then leaving them to whatever might happen. So making sure that is across the economy as well, not just in retail, not just in hospitality, but in those other industries too.
Okay, thank you. Sue?
Hi, yes, I think everything that the Conservatives are focused on in terms of our manifesto and how we look forward is to make sure that economic growth is the #1 policy objective, and we will make sure. So if we do X, will that impact the economy in a positive way? And I suppose I'm not going to dwell on infrastructure because that is part of the decisions, but having that is so important, having an infrastructure system that works in terms of facilitating economic growth. But we spoke a little bit about small businesses and what could you do as a small business to start that up. I was one of those people that started up my small business in 2013 when I was made redundant from a very large global corporation. And I was so scared because everything was so confusing. You were, #1 fear was not paying the right amount of tax and having HMRC knocking on your door. So the first thing I did was get a really good accountant. But that cost money as well. And I suppose what we're looking at is a really, really cluttered landscape for business support. And we've got, in Scotland right now, we've got over 100 different bodies offering 750 different interventions that can support you as a business. And if you are that small business, i.e. one person starting off, you do not have the time and the resource, if you are running your business and creating your sales and your revenue, to figure out and navigate that landscape. That's the harsh reality of it. So you can't scale up and you can't grow. And that's
what would you do about that?
Well, we would reduce everything down. We'd merge them all into one organisation called Growth Scotland and have that one point of contact for that business owner. So you've got that expert there to help you navigate through. Sorry, I'm getting a bit annoyed by my thing. And because it was really, really complicated. So we would just make it much more simple for them. We would have the sort of enterprise zones. So if you were that small startup, you could then scale up. You don't have to go from working at home to that, where do you find the next premises that's just the right size? And it's quite some distance from you, because you don't want that. You want to be able to scale up in an area that's familiar to you, where you can keep your employees and staff. And there's some good stuff, for example, going on at the Queen Elizabeth, no, which university is it? Queen Margaret, thank you. I've written Queen Margaret Hospital on my note here, I'm getting confused. So that would be something we'd want to sort of replicate. But also the business rates relief. You know, the UK government has a 40% business rates relief across the board. And what we found is that wasn't being passed on by the Scottish Government, and that was £700 million that weren't passed on. And we want to see that rates relief passed on in full to retail and leisure business, not just hospitality.
Right, Wendy? Not left out.
This is definitely one where the interplay between the UK and Scottish governments is really, really important. And I think there is an opportunity coming up at Westminster, because what would be the one single factor that would help the economy across the UK, instead of getting into what we often seem to get into, which is, oh, we're slightly better on this indicator in Scotland, we're slightly worse in relation to England on this, and that's fixing our relationship with the EU. There's an EU reset bill that we're expecting in the King's speech. And sorry, Jackie, I don't think what the government is outlaying goes any way near far enough in order to fix that relationship. And certainly my party will be pushing for a bespoke customs union between the UK and the EU, because that is the single biggest thing that we can do to grow our economy in Scotland. The other thing for me is there has just been a consistent lack of an industrial strategy in Scotland for some time. I think we need to get serious about identifying the things that we are really good at and the things that we've got potential to be good at, instead of throwing money, because we have been throwing money at smelters in Lochaber, ferries, spaceports in the Highlands. We need to, Prestwick Airport, we need to really be thinking quite strategically about what Scotland is good at and wants to be good at. Space is a good example. We've obviously got, did have the spaceport in the Highlands, we've got the one in Shetland, but actually Glasgow is a real hub in space in terms of some of the smaller components, etc. And we really need to be driving that. The other colleagues have talked a lot about SMEs. The other thing I think we're really bad at is actually spinning SMEs into bigger companies. Companies just get stuck. Yep. Why is that? We need to properly look at that and understand that so that we can target the right industries. But no, I absolutely agree in terms of the business rates. We need to reform planning, and there is no doubt that we have made it more expensive, both at Scottish and UK government level, to do business, whether that be business rates, whether that be national employer insurance contributions. And we need to properly start thinking about how we deliver that. From some of the things that we've certainly talked about is 20 million for a new arm of the Scottish National Investment Bank that will specifically look at SMEs. We certainly think that things such as the national insurance hike need to be looked at from a UK perspective, and we need to get serious about growing the economy. That is the single thing that will deliver for all the services that we've talked about and will continue to talk about for the rest of this hustings.
Thank you. Jackie, what would Scottish Labour do to make it easier to start and grow a business in Scotland?
So let me start by saying growing the economy is good for jobs, it's good for services, it's good for the country. And that growth gives you more in terms of revenue, tax receipts, to spend on the things that we consider priorities. I would also have a system where we take away the current business rate system. Sue is right that actually the money that was provided by the UK government to the Scottish government to provide relief has not been spent in full, and there are many businesses struggling and going to the wall. The reform system we would put in place would be neutral in terms of its revenue raising and we would do so in consultation with businesses and make sure that online giants are captured in that. We wouldn't raise income tax over the lifetime of the Parliament, and unlike others who have promised it in the past, we would stick to that promise, and we would also reform the planning system so that it's speeded up, because I have constituents with planning applications that go on for literally over a year, and it costs them in terms of the development. We've talked about reforming the skills system. The one thing we would do in addition to the 9,000 apprenticeships is ring fence the money that businesses put in the apprenticeship levy. We would also reduce the institutional clutter that is there, and I'm not going to repeat the points made by others, but a single industrial strategy actually matters. Let me take a slightly different approach. Just in closing, when I look at women in business, I know that women, 54% of new startups are started by women, but 70% of those new startups don't last out the year. Women in business is undercapitalised. Your share of grants is less than anybody else's. Your share of equity going into a women's business is less than anybody else's. And I leave you with this one stat. If we had the same scale of women-led employment as the US does, that's sitting at 39%. The benefit to the economy, let me get this figure right, is £17 billion of an annual economic contribution. What growth that would be. And actually, we would cover all the deficits that currently exist in the government's plans.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Right, childcare, often talked about as a woman's issue, as an exhaustive mother of 3 children. I definitely have the scars for that. But it's also an economic and social issue that affects everybody and Scotland's infrastructure. Whether people can work, whether they can study, whether they can care, whether they can participate in public life. So it is not a women's issue in its, definition. So politicians, and I'm going to go to Sue first. If you had to pick one childcare reform that would make the biggest difference to somebody's participation, not just a woman, it could be the dad, their participation in the labour market, what would it be?
I would have much more flexible childcare that works for families and not for the convenience of the local authority.
Okay. What does that look like?
Well, that means that if a family needs childcare at set days and set hours because of their work commitments, that should be the childcare they're offered from the local authority, not days and hours that suit the provision from the local. I hear that time and time again. I've been offered Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 10 till whatever, but I actually work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so it doesn't work. Okay. Also, the flexibility is the cross-border placements. We don't live and work by local authority boundary. That money should be able to be spent in different local authorities. That's the things. And we actually heard that when I was the education convener. And I tried to bring the local authorities in that were refusing to pay as for evidence, and they refused to come. So it was really challenging. And one other thing, Catherine, is the under 2 money, the government policy is that the under 2s get more, but local authorities aren't passing that on in full to the private nursery providers. They're skimming it off the top to fund and have a little team of people in their head office rather than getting the full allowance for any age group and to support that ratio of childcare. I want it straight to the providers.
Okay, Shirley-Anne, I'll let you come into that in a minute. Jackie, what would Labour do, one childcare reform, to make a big difference to participation in the labour market?
So I think it is about flexibility, and it is about meeting families where they are. Everybody lives their life differently. Everybody's work pattern is potentially different. So it's about ensuring that you have not just nursery provision, which is great, but actually that there are sufficient childminders in an area to cope, that there is a framework of different provision that people can buy into at different points, not that it's just free, because I know people that need after-school care clubs, I know people that need something for the summer holidays. It's not just about, we're just going to do this one thing, it's about making sure that whole plethora of provision is in place. We have said we will increase the tax-free child allowance for every child to £3,000. And I think that's going to be an important consideration for families, but it is that flexibility. The one thing I would also say is it's not just about childcare. It's also about care of our older people. And increasingly that falls to women. some men, but it increasingly falls to women. And as social care is being cut, radically cut in our communities, that's going to have an impact on women and men participation in the labour market if they are still having to care for older people as well. So we just need to pause and think. If this is designed to increase our impact on the economy and our availability to work, then we need to look at both ends of the spectrum, not just one.
Okay. Shirley-Anne Somerville, a chance to respond and tell us what the SNP would do to perhaps improve things next government.
Sure. So we've already delivered a doubling of childcare for 3, 4 and eligible 2-year-olds, and we do want to go further with that, and the expansion will then be from 9 months to the end of primary school. And people's talked about flexibility, the right to do so, and to talk about the different ways that early learning and childcare, and they are two different discussions to have, can look very different depending on what that family needs. It can look very different if you're on an island or a rural community compared to if you're in the city centre of Dunfermline. So we need to ensure that this responds in the way that family needs it to do. And when we're looking at the expansion from 9 months, for example, that does not have to look and shouldn't look like just a replication of what we have for 3, 4s and eligible 2s. There are different ways that that can be achieved. It's also important we tie that into the commitment that we have for breakfast clubs within every primary school by 2027. It's important as we're looking at childcare and out of school care. It's useful for the mum, dad, the carer to get to work if they wish to do so, absolutely. But it's also important that we can assist those families in our poorest communities, actually make sure that they're assisting that child to have that good breakfast before they start at school. And it is exceptionally good for the economy. I've already mentioned earlier on the example of how we're working with colleges to look at how you get on a college course and then what you do with your childcare and transport and so on around that. And it's how we work with employers too. And I was particularly caught by some of the experiences I had when, as a minister, I was developing the Child Poverty Delivery Plan. And we spoke to those in the public sector and the private sector about how we can work with businesses to ensure that, where possible, businesses can be flexible in hours, if that works for them, to allow a parent to be able to do a school run. If it doesn't make and challenge the business to be able to function, why does someone have to be in for 9 o'clock? Can it be a different time? Can you change the working hours? And the experiences we had with some of the businesses and some of the councils that were involved were, it made a real difference to the individual. They kept women in employment. They brought more women in, the increased hours, particularly of women, because the flexibility of the childcare and the flexibility of the employment can work together. So it's also how we work with businesses. Now, I know that doesn't work for everywhere, and if you've got a shop to open, it's got to open at certain times. So this is not a blanket approach at all. But it's one of the important things we have to do, whether it's on childcare or other issues. We want to grow the economy. We need to ensure that we're working with businesses to see where we can work together for the benefit of the business and for the benefit of the wider society. Okay. And for this case, some of the employers, particularly the new mums.
Thank you. Gillian, a seamless link into a new mum. I'm sure you're having all of this joy. What would the Greens do to make this easier for people to work?
I think choice and availability of places is a first step, I think is really important. You can tell Callan's our first, because we kind of didn't realise until he was 3, 4 months old that before he was born, we should have had him on a waiting list somewhere. I was horrified at the number of places that came back to us saying, no, we've got no space. Why were you not looking before this? Kind of didn't know. So that availability of place and the diversity of places too, I think is really important, because it's not everyone that wants their wee one to go into a nursery. Childminders are really important. And making sure we support that workforce as well, and grow that workforce. We need more places across the board. I think Sue's right on the cross-boundary placements as well. I had a visit to a nursery in West Lothian where some of those families have moved twice. And if it's complicated getting a small baby into their first placement, trying to change a placement for one of those older children with 4 weeks notice is nigh on impossible for those families. And that ultimately usually ends up in women dropping the number of hours that they're doing to bridge that gap between that and the next placement. And that's decisions that local authorities are taking about how people live their lives, and they shouldn't. And really, the money should follow the child rather than being accounted for on that local authority boundary. And Sue's right, people don't live their lives by local authority boundaries.
Is it a Herculean challenge the Greens can fix?
I think it's going to take all of Parliament to fix it. Okay. And I actually think there is a decent amount of consensus across us on how we fix that.
Especially if Gillian's saying Sue's right.
Honestly, groundbreaking.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest, for any journalist in the room, that's the biggest takeaway from today. Gillian agrees with Sue. But we need to make sure that there's that free amount of childcare there for people as well, and that it goes beyond the current offer that we have. And crucially, that it starts, we want to bring that 1140 hours down to 2-year-olds and want it to start the week after that child turns 2. At the moment, across the country, many families are having to wait until the start of the next school term for those 1140 hours to kick in for 3-year-olds. That's costing families thousands of pounds. And there are a great number of families that are planning their next child based on when those free childcare hours kick in. It's really an appalling way to be doing family planning by the number of free childcare hours that everybody's getting. And actually, that's why we need to increase that across the board. We want 570 hours for wee ones from when they're 6 months old, so that 2-year point when that 1140 hours kicks in, giving that greater flexibility to families, that greater choice, and ultimately supporting family budgets.
Wendy, it's a costly problem. How would the
Yeah,
Democrats
I
fix
always
it?
say the first political thing I ever did was join the board of the local playgroup. Because actually you are getting involved in what's happening in your community. I would have to say as well that playgroup folded because of some of the extension to childcare. Because of after I had left, but because of some of, and I was very clear, I wanted my kids to have a playgroup and a nursery experience, and I was very fortunate that I was in this position with family support that I could make that happen, and I'm very conscious that other families aren't. But the reason why I say that playgroup folded was because the extension of childcare hours actually had an unwelcome effect, which meant that, basically as a parent, when you're juggling all these other things, why get involved in the playgroup when they can already go straight to nursery? And so I think one of the challenges here is the boundary between childcare and education. And I think it's really easy to kind of blur the two. I remember getting development plans from my kids' after school clubs. To be honest, if they played, made loom bands and ran about the back of the playground, I had no issues with that. They didn't need a development plan. It was just I need somebody to look after them on the other parts of the school day.
So where do we need reform then?
Yeah, so it is about that flexibility and availability. The other thing I want to say is I totally agree with Jackie. I think, looking around this room, I'm actually not the default parent anymore. My husband is, but he is currently caring for his 95-year-old mother. One of the things that I brought in the last Parliament was a private member's bill around carers leave, which gives unpaid carers the right to time off from their employers, which is the first time unpaid carers have had an employment right. So I think we need to be thinking about care much more widely. But, I think there is great areas of consensus here. The local authority boundaries, definitely. I was in Fife working in Edinburgh. Our kids went to nursery when I first went back after maternity leave in Edinburgh, because basically if something happened on the bridge, I wanted us all to be on the same side. But we certainly want to look at working families and that prioritisation of that extension of ELC, because and we also want it to start on a child's 3rd birthday. The other challenge sometimes is back to Gillian's point around how to do family planning. If you're not getting funding starting till the term after a child's 3rd birthday, that can be really, really difficult in terms of how you make that work as a family. And we're not going to shift this from being seen as a woman's issue unless we start properly thinking about these kind of issues in that context and funding falling children.
Thank you. Kim, what would reform do to change this and make it easier for people to work when they've got kids?
So I'd like to start by saying that I'm of an age where I've got 3 grown-up children and they all went to nursery, but my husband and I had to pay. There were no grants available at that time, and I often felt for years as if I was working for nothing. But that's one of the things that you have to go through sometimes when you have kids. I do think that flexibility is the key. Too many private nurseries want kids to be there from between 9 in the morning till 6 at night, and charging fees. I think that I looked at some nurseries recently, actually, for a friend, and £1,400. But.
So would you support more involvement from the government, or do you think parents should be paying for it?
No, well, I obviously think both, and if parents can't pay for it, they will do that. But I do think government support is important as well, across the board. Very difficult with flexibility. Obviously, it's difficult for the nursery because they have to be appropriately staffed at all times, and sometimes they maybe don't have sufficient kids there, so there's, economic imbalance there. But I do think that that's a situation where public money is important to create that flexibility. I also think that employers that can provide creche facilities and nursery facilities as part of the employment is fantastic as well, and I think that they should be given more praise and maybe more incentives to do that more routinely. I do remember, I think it was Wendy that said that having the frantic phone call with my husband as 5:30 was approaching and we were both stuck at work, who was going to make it to the nursery on time. So, yeah, absolutely. Nurseries that suit actual working hours. But in terms of employment legislation, I mean, we've come so far in terms of flexibility of hours. And, my employer at the moment is really good in terms of the younger members of staff that I work for. And the thing that we don't mention often enough is the loyalty that you get from female staff when they do have an employer who's been willing to give them flexibility with their childcare and just their family commitments. And you mentioned elderly parents. And I think in that situation, when an employer is able to do that, they do get great loyalty from their workforce.
Okay, Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Right, we've got about 20 minutes. I'm sure everybody's burning with questions in response to some of what we've heard. So happy to open this up. Sharon has a microphone if everyone wants to. Ask a question, you can say who you are. Keep it, as I say, to a question. Here we go. Thanks.
Thank you, Shirley-Anne from Prosper. I just wanted to say, first of all, what a breath of fresh air to hear panellists agreeing. Actually, this is going to
we don't need that conflict training, do we?
It does take all of us to build a successful economy. So, thank you. A breath of fresh air. So, my question.
Yes.
Women's Enterprise Scotland has done really sterling work over the last 5-10 years, and really setting out some of the things that you were alluding to, Jackie. So I really just wanted to ask all of you. They've come out with very clear recommendations about a women's enterprise centre, a women's business centre. It's proven. We've got numbers. Is your party going to make sure it happens? Okay, so we probably won't go to all of you. We'll try and get a little, mix here. Anybody want to answer that question?
I'll go first. I have worked with Wes for a number of years now, from the days in the Economy Committee where we were trying to push the boundaries of what both the Parliament and the government understood to be the opportunity for women in business. So I'm a fan. I probably can't commit my party to doing it, but as deputy leader, I can certainly pester them with
what to do, can't you?
I'm not saying so on a recording. But yes, I'm a fan because I think unless you get that gendered perspective, then you're not actually going to deliver on the potential that there is for women in business.
Okay, another question. We'll just keep it going like that so we can get as many thoughts. This lady here. Thanks, Sharon. Who you are and what's your question?
Hi everyone, I'm Kirsty Tinsdale from Food and Drink Federation Scotland, as most of you very well. My question was around our businesses are facing lots of increased costs, as you know, energy and everything, but it's also like packaging, national insurance contributions, ingredients, commodities and stuff like that. And they're absorbing the costs as much as they can, but they can't take much more, to be honest. I guess two parts of my question. Would your party prioritise the food and drink industry? You mentioned industrial strategies, but which sectors would that include? And then how would you support them to enable them to survive firstly and then also grow as well?
Shirley-Anne, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so the food and drink industry is so exceptionally important, both within Scotland and internationally. So it's got to be one of those areas where we do support further expansion. It's one of the areas where we are globally renowned for exceptionally high value and high quality products. And that means it's one of those key sectors within the economy that we do need to support, and we're absolutely determined to be able to do so, whether that's a small individual supplier and producer or some of our larger brands. There is so much potential both here and abroad to be able to make even more than we have done already of Scottish food and drink.
Huge frustration, I take it, in your industry. What would you like to be seen done?
We're actually forecasting that food inflation in
10%.
at least 9 to 10% by the end of the year. That way, our economist is not willing to review that against it because we don't know everything that's happening. But yeah, I think, and this is a kind of between UK and Scottish government, there's energy price stuff, which I think Scottish government could do stuff. And at UK level, we've not been included in like the industrial strategy or the British kind of stiffness scheme. Food and drink's not in there. We do need to support energy, and that's a big issue we had even before the war. That trying to decarbonise and move to net zero was a big challenge before that, so now it's even worse. So that's probably one area I'm prioritising the industry and working with us, listening to our businesses as well. Because sometimes that doesn't always happen. You hear about something and we've not going to be involved. So engaging with us from the start.
Yeah.
Do you want to come in, Wendy?
I mean, I think one of the challenges is food and drink has been seen as Shirley-Anne said, you know, so important, world renowned. But as a result of that, has been a bit neglected and assumed that it will be fine. So if you look at the Scotch whisky industry, for example, you know, we're seeing job losses in distilleries and contractions. Certainly in my own constituency, we had a distillery go into administration. Thankfully, came straight back out. We haven't seen movement from the UK government in relation to duty prices, but we've also seen, you know, that sort of hospitality, food and drink aspect, those squeezes on hospitality is certainly having that. So I think we do need to think quite specifically about support for that sector, because if we take it right back to agriculture, it actually is a huge issue. We've got certainly Alistair Carmichael, who is my colleague and chair of the DEFRA Select Committee. He's got a supply chain fairness bill that he's looking to bring through, because actually, on the other hand, you have farmers who are really struggling to meet cost of production. That then means that you're taking supplies from elsewhere rather than making it UK.
Gillian's itching in her seat there to answer this question too.
I had as part of my co-leader run around the country, I've had a really lovely visit to Orkney cheese, and I think there's a particular issue for some of these island producers as well around that. Those higher costs again for even bringing their product to the mainland, not just exporting it more widely. And with the cost of fuel across the board going up, those transport costs are a particular thing that's hitting them. But one of the things that they highlighted to us was changing over some of the way they power their operation there. The grant scheme to be able to change some of their boilers over to better fuels was going to take so long and shut down production for such a length of time that it actually didn't make business sense to change that over. So I think there's ways through current government schemes to be able to support that change quickly, that we could make some of these decisions more quickly to mean that we could make those good changes, that we could that we could save some of that money in how they power their operations. But it does rely on those quick decisions from government.
Okay, we'll have another question. We'll make sure we bring in Sue and Kim.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd really like to answer that question.
Okay,
if
no,
that's
go on
okay.
then, yeah.
So one of the things that I've found really interesting in this election is how engaged people, ordinary people that you speak to on the doors, are with the international situation and how that's impacting things at home. And I mean, I think that in terms of food and drink, that the main thing that's affecting prices, because it's to do with the means of production and then getting things through the supplier and into the shops, is fuel. Now, the Middle East has been in crisis for decades, and that situation is not going to be sorted overnight. And for the Westminster Parliament to pursuing the policies that they're pursuing at the moment, I think it's just crazy. It impacts on what we're allowed to do in Scotland because of obviously the devolved powers. But, you know, Reform's position is we need a range of energy. You know, we need to rehabilitate North Sea gas. We need to, start thinking more about what we could do with nuclear. And that would solve a lot of our problems. But I don't think we should neglect net zero at the same time, because, other countries seem to be able to manage the two in tandem. And I think that we could do that here. And I'd also like to say something about Zero Waste Scotland, because there's very little help for food production businesses and drinks businesses if they want to, be moving more towards net zero. There's very little, formal help and government advice. And Zero Waste Scotland seems to be focused completely on food waste. And I don't understand why that is. I think it's a missed opportunity for the government.
Okay, I was going to move on, but everyone's going like this to me. Sue, you want to respond? Your thoughts on the frustrations for Scotland's food and drink industry?
The national insurance increase, we've had lots of things, but the NI increase has put so much pressure on our businesses. And then that has driven internally as well. There's the national minimum wage, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that then creates an artificial wage inflation within those companies as well. And that then puts a pressure on the pension contributions that the employer has to pay. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on from some of these decisions, and it's how they all come together to cumulatively put pressures on businesses we need to be a bit more wise about. But I think maybe we should be pausing the pressure on net zero to change the supply. I'm not saying we shouldn't be striving to do that, Gillian. I'm just saying right now, let's just take the foot off the gas and let the businesses sit where they are and maybe deal with what they're facing right now. And the other thing in terms of commercial properties, we want to shift how business rates are funded as a whole, and we would give the businesses a £20,000 personal allowance in terms of business rates, much like you do with personal taxation, to give you a little bit more breathing space when it comes to the pressures and taxes that we can control in Scotland.
Thank you. Jackie, would you be giving any money out?
Yes, but let me just say, because I think it's important to, I think going back on, climate change, not recognising that is happening, going back on the transition to renewables is exactly the wrong place to be.
I'm just saying
and I have to say that the problem for the food and drink industry is immediate. It is in large part driven by the energy crisis that we're facing. And what we need to do is provide immediate help. So we have said, not waiting for any length of time, but if we are in office, within the first 100 days, there will be an emergency package of at least £100 million. We will look at bulk purchasing fuel, because that will help industry. We will look at grants and loans to industry to help them tide over. Nobody really knows how long this is going to last and what the impact is going to be. Sure. You need a government that's on your side, that's going to do something immediately, not wring their hands and say, well, it's not really our responsibility, we'll wait and an excuse and blame somebody else. We need to do it now because we recognise the pressure people are under.
Okay. Who else? Oh my goodness.
Oh, lots of hands.
What did we say?
A man.
Hi, Brian McLaughlin from the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations. The delayed discharge is costing the NHS in Scotland over £1 million every day. That's people who are maybe fit enough to go home, but their home isn't fit for their needs or their social care package isn't. What is your party going to do to integrate social housing with health policy?
Any takers for that? If not, Gillian? Housing?
So, that sun's getting annoying. So, I actually would really like to see in the next session of Parliament that every single Minister or Cabinet Secretary across government actually takes their portfolio's impact on health really seriously, because you're right, there are so many things outside of health itself that have an impact on the health service, on social care, on a whole variety of issues. We need to make sure that we're actually building housing stock that doesn't need adaptations for people, that is accessible from the word go, because that is causing a huge number of delays across the piece, whether that's people moving into accessible homes or people coming home from hospital. Those adaptations take time, they take money, whereas if we put them in from the word go, they're adaptable for whatever happens to people going forward. We need to make sure that there are more people working in social care as well. That means paying them properly, giving them a good level of progression and career progression that will keep them in that sector for the long term, rather than losing them as we are at the moment to supermarkets and other places that pay more and don't have that same level of physical and emotional effort that our carers are putting into the system. Some of that is making sure that we support local authorities to be able to have that time and people to be able to do that join up as well. I don't think all of this and all the levers for this sit in the Scottish Parliament either. It's about how we fund local authorities and give them the space to do what's right for their local areas as well, because there will be differences across the country, and I don't think we're getting that right in particularly remote and rural areas at the moment.
Wendy's giving me the eyeballs.
Yeah,
in your eyes.
I mean,
don't know.
I wanted to kind of jump on top of what Gillian said there about local authorities. I think that is one of the key challenges. Delayed discharge is costing us £440 million a year. Where could that be better spent? And often, and I certainly have dealt with this in terms of casework, people are waiting because they do need adaptations at home, and it's the local authority that needs to do them.
Yep.
Had a couple of very distressing MND cases where actually by the time you get an adaptation sorted, the condition has actually progressed and it's out of date. So for me, one of the challenges with local authority funding is increasingly they have been, you say it's different levers, and I agree to an extent, but I do think that local authorities have been curtailed in some of the levers they can pull because some of the funding they're being given is specifically to deliver Scottish Government priorities, which means the size of the pot that they have to deal with some of these other things is more difficult. So we want to get to a 7-day discharge model so that we can get people out more quickly, but that is going to need a big funding in terms of social care, and from a social housing perspective, we do need it for these key workers. Gillian's talked about the new people that we need. I don't disagree with that, but if we can't actually get houses for those people in the areas when we need them, unsurprisingly, we're not going to get the people to fill those roles.
Okay, Kim?
So I think that there are things that business enterprise could do with a wee bit of a nudge from planning. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed with all the new developments that have been going up around Glasgow, they're all on multiple levels, very nice fancy townhouses, but rarely in any of these developments do you see single stories. And, these smaller properties on the one level is the sort of property that, people that are advancing in age, when they're thinking about downsizing, would like to move to. But I just don't think the opportunities are available, and I think it's been a missed opportunity for local government and for national government.
Okay, Jackie?
Yep, this is a twofold problem. It's not just about the condition of the housing and the physical aspect of the housing. It is also about the care that's provided inside it. Now, many, many moons ago, when I was a minister, we actually funded housing support alongside housing associations so that there was care provided within people's homes as they discharged from hospital. If you're talking about just the physical condition, in my area, the wait for OTs to assess that property is not measured in days or even in weeks, it's measured in months. So no wonder we've got delayed discharge. Somebody's already covered the cost of it. We would provide 300 step-down beds in the care sector, plus 1,000 extra care packages. And I'll tell you why that's so important. If you take part of the area I represent is Argyll and Bute. A few months ago, I needed to argue with them and essentially to get a care package for somebody coming out of hospital, and we needed to wait for somebody to die before a care package would be released. Now, it's being taken as a saving. So there are delayed discharges backing up because the underfunding of social care by this government is nothing short of criminal. Local authorities, health and social care partnerships reported last year a £560 million shortfall in their budget. It's projected this year to be £750 million. That means cuts to people's care packages, even though their condition may not have changed. So I've got constituents who used to have overnight cover, now have no cover at all overnight.
We're running shortly, a bit out of time, so we'll have Sue and we'll have Shirley-Anne on housing.
Yes, thanks. In terms of, I agree with what Wendy said. I had a constituent that came to me with MND and asked for a shower to be placed downstairs, and the local authority says, "You're not ill enough yet." I thought that was absolutely dreadful. And we did get the shower eventually, but it's just not on. But we would introduce a fast-track care, and we would have some temporary placement into care homes if they've not been discharged from the hospital in 48 hours. I think I've got here, we would have another 600 additional short-term care home beds. It's all about getting the flow in the NHS to get the patients treated.
Shirley-Anne?
Just quickly.
So there's different aspects to this. Within the time limits I have, I'll talk about a couple. One is the number of carers that we have. We have seen a massive reduction in those that are able to get visas to come to Scotland and the UK to be able to be carers. That's partly because of Brexit and partly because of the changes to immigration. Now, the Scottish Government, within the powers that we have attempted to look at visa support packages to allow people that are in the UK to be able to work in Scotland. But it shows the limitations we have if we're having that decrease in numbers of people who can be carers. For the social housing aspect, we doubled the amount of money that was in for adaptations for housing associations, and I was particularly pleased with a visit I did, I think it was in Linlithgow, to, I'm going to guess it was Baillie, but it might be another housing association that are available, where we actually looked at how older people are supported, not just on delayed discharge, but actually prevention from going to hospital because of technology and things that can be done. And the final point I'll make is, I know it's very important that we try to decrease the amount of regulations that are impacting on business. But one of the impacts that we also need to look at is the social impacts, which is why we will bring forward accessible housing standards, because that's about getting your house right in the first place, and that's about ensuring, again, prevention to stop people having to go into hospital and to make that their one home that they can stay in right into their older age. It's better for the individual, and it's also better and more efficient for the economy.
We are running out of time, so treat this as a rapid fire round. You've got seconds to tell the voters in this room what is at stake in this election. Why should they trust your party and women in your party with that responsibility? And you really have to be quick. Kim, what's at stake? Why should the voters trust Reform UK?
I'd like to talk about what I've seen on the Heard on the Doors. Overwhelmingly, people are either disengaged or they're not happy with how things are going in Scotland. And the only way that that can change is by voting the SNP out of government on the 7th of May. Reform has a plan for change. And as I see it, you've nothing to lose.
Okay, Sue, Conservatives, should we trust you?
Well, our economy is stagnating, businesses are closing, as you can see across the streets in Glasgow, and people are struggling to get jobs. So the SNP still continue to focus all of their time and money on pushing that independence referendum. Indeed, that's what they said will be the very first debate and vote that we have, should they gain that majority on the 7th of May. The Scottish Conservatives will stand up for business, will reform planning and procurement, and we will invest in skills to get Scotland moving again.
Okay, Jackie.
The SNP have had 20 years. If they had a good idea, we would have seen it by now. What you're seeing is the NHS failing. It's failing you, it's failing your family, and that's despite the valiant work of the staff that work in our NHS. You're seeing an education system that's failing your kids. Attainment gap is continuing to grow, it's not diminishing. And you see kids who are leaving school without the ability to read or write. We also have a housing emergency. We would commit to building 125,000 new homes. We have an economy that is stagnating. So all I would say to you is, and given that this is my last hustings, it's great, can I say to you, Reform can't win here. The SNP don't deserve to win. Vote Scottish Labour on the 7th of May.
Okay, and Gillian, what's at stake? Why should you be trusted?
Everything's at stake. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. We're in the middle of a climate crisis. We're seeing the far right on the rise across the UK. We're seeing instability on the world stage. There's never been a more important time to have good women in Parliament, and we need to make sure that we return as many women as possible, and I'd really like as many of those to be our women in the Scottish Greens. We've got a track record over the last 5 years of delivering for people across the country, whether that be under 22's free bus, scrapping school meal debt and delivering more free school meals to more kids than ever before across the country. We want to expand on that, the biggest expansion of free childcare in a generation, free bus travel for everyone, and ultimately putting more money back in the pockets of people across the country. So for a fairer, greener and independent Scotland, please vote for the Scottish Greens next week.
Wendy, same for you.
Thank you. Scotland has so much going for it, but I think as we've discussed this morning, it feels like so much of it isn't working. I've talked about the importance of the interplay between the Scottish and UK governments and indeed their parliaments. And I do think the Scottish Liberal Democrats are a party that is on the up. We had 6 MPs in 2024 in Scotland. Nobody saw us getting that. We're the third largest party, again, from a UK perspective. And what we've demonstrated, what we do with those numbers, is that we deliver. We work hard as local community champions, but we'll also be pragmatic and work to deliver the key priorities that I think have come up across. So with this election, you have the opportunity to vote for a Lib Dem wherever you live in Scotland, not even just the heartlands of places like North East Fife. So use your peach ballot wisely. You have the opportunity to vote as many Lib Dems in, because I think we can really make a positive difference.
Thank you, Shirley-Anne Somerville. What's at stake?
So I think we need to ensure that we've got a government in Scotland that delivers for the priorities of the people of Scotland. So that is about ensuring that we continue with our plan in the NHS and tackling the cost of living crisis. We do that by growing our economy and eradicating child poverty. We also need to make sure that we have that fresh start for independence as well, because as fuel prices have been shown and the energy crisis is shown, we do not have the powers within Scotland at the moment to be able to take all the changes into our own hands that we would like to do. Another important aspect I think we need to think about in this election, and this has been a very convivial hustings amongst all of us here today, but we do need to ensure that we are locking out any politician, male or female, that is going to bring division and attack community cohesion within Scotland. Okay. Because there is something really, really difficult that we have to face up to about some of the policies that are being presented that are othering members of our society. And that is a dangerous place for politics to be. And the final point is experienced leadership. Yes, it's under a man, but experienced leadership that will be able to deliver on Scotland's priorities.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. So that brings us to a close for this morning's hustings. Want to thank all of our politicians basking in the sun of our broken roof here. If only that bit was a little bit over, but it's better than rain. For all your time, for your answers, for your consideration. I know it was a little different to some of the televised ones. It was far more polite. So hopefully somebody's got something from that, and for keeping the discussion so respectful. I think that matters. So we've got until May the 7th, coverage and analysis of the campaign, and today's event is of course available in your news brand of choice, a business on Bath Street that isn't collapsing, the Herald. Thank you again for coming, and thanks again to Women in Public Affairs Scotland and to DeHavilland Scotland, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.